Welcome to Energy Roundtable. This is something new we're trying, and I'm joined today by my co-host on the Energy Radio podcast, Lisa Barber. Lisa, welcome to the Energy Roundtable.
Thank you, Matt. This is the first episode. This will be fun.
Yeah, we'll see how this goes. The intent is to be a bit of an informal discussion of the news events or the news stories that are breaking in our space, and we just kind of go back and forth informally, opinions, kind of thoughts, what does it mean for our space? So to start, Lisa's got a couple kind of news stories, and we'll see how this goes. Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, so I guess one of the first ones that I saw this week, Matt, that was kind of interesting was Volvo to go electric only and shift all sales online by 2030. So there's two interesting components there. One is the go electric only. There's no mention of hydrogen, which I found to be very interesting because, obviously you look at GM and you look at Honda and you look at Toyota, and all of them have hydrogen stories. I think actually, I could be mistaken, but even during the Super Bowl, I'm pretty sure Toyota had an ad focusing on the hydrogen piece. And then the all sales online by 2030, I thought was another interesting piece. And I guess that's just as a direct factor maybe with the way that COVID has been going and maybe some of the successes they've seen, with purchasing cars online. I don't know.
Now, you're more of a gearhead than I am. You're much more of a car person than I am. I mean, can you buy a car just online, or do you have to go and sit in it and test drive it?
Well, I need to test drive it for sure. But for me, the car is more than just getting from point A to B. Like I want to feel the car, and is it comfortable? Is everything in reach? What are the gimmicks, and what's all the gadgets? Obviously, how fast can it go, and how peppy is it, and how does it corner, and all that kind of stuff that comes into it. No, that part's important to me. So I don't know how I would never buy a car online, at least, well, unless everybody moves to that, then I might be in trouble, but it would not be my preference.
Your thumbs down on the buying online thing.
Yes, I definitely
I probably thumbs up on the buying online because I don't like, I'm not my personality. I don't get into the details. Obviously I value quality, but I can't pick it out necessarily. I don't gravitate towards that. Convenience and that kind of stuff. I can get my head around that. The EV piece, it's interesting that you observe that they went straight to that solution and they're not kind of hedging their bets. Volvo is an interesting brand, right? They've always had this kind of safety, and you always grew up hearing that Volvo was a tank, and so does this align with that? Maybe not. But it is interesting that they've picked a winner, and we'll see if they're right. I mean, it's a bit of an arms race. I still think in the vehicle space, but it'll be interesting. What do they say when they're going to be first available?
Well, interestingly enough, they also say that by 2025, Volvo expects half the cars it sells to be fully electric and the other half to be hybrids. So they're really, dedicated to obviously this kind of electrification phase.
Have you ever driven an EV? A full EV?
I haven't actually, which is probably, some people tell me, like if, some of the people that we work with on a regular who own electric cars, they tell me I'm missing out.
Yet they don't offer to let you have a spin.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah.
But like George Taylor, who was on our podcast last week, who's a bit of a motorhead, rides motorcycles and loves the sound of the engine roaring. When I step on that accelerator, I want to actually hear something, right? Like that's what gets me excited. So like I can never imagine going to an F1 race and hearing nothing. Like that just wouldn't be fun for me.
But they do say that those who drive EVs, they do say that you don't hear it, but you feel it. Like the G forces and the acceleration, because there's no slip, there's none of that latency. It's just you just feel it.
Well, and maybe like I don't know if the higher end models like the Tesla has. Maybe you get in the car and there's a button for sound, right? So maybe that would help me out. But I don't know.
It's going to be an interesting development to watch as it's coming. I mean, the EV evolution is coming. There's no doubt about that. The race between hydrogen and EVs will be interesting to watch. What's interesting for me is the knock-on effects of, okay, We have, I have a relatively new home that we get to live in, and it's got a 200 amp service. But, what do the old homes have, and how does that relate to charging at home, the infrastructure across the roads? We have a distribution system that has been built for X, and now we're trying to go to 2, 3, 4X. So, for me, as not a car guy, it's the knock-on effects of what does it mean for Volvo and Tesla and everybody to hit their projection curves and probably exceed them. And what does that mean for the infrastructure? So that's an interesting piece to watch. And how do we get to that point? And, time will tell, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Cool.
Another one that was kind of interesting that was related to hydrogen was Metrolinx pumps brakes on GO trains powered by hydrogen. I don't know if you saw that article or not, but that was interesting also. I think that what they kind of suggest is that, there's not enough testing. They're not really sure about, the ability to, run on it safely. I don't know. I don't exactly know what the big hesitation is, but it's surprising because it's a $7 million project that was over 4 years that they shelved. So lots of money and a lot of time when you think about it.
Yeah, it's, if you talk to the guys in the folks who've been in hydrogen for a while, I mean, we have a senior first person in our firm who was with Ballard, 20 years ago. And, they all say, the hydrogen's not new. But when you hear stories like this, you worry that, okay, 20 years ago, it was cutting edge and maybe it was before its time. And now we're starting to hear it all over the place. But when people start to pull out of stuff, that does, concern me. Are we going, we all thought this was the second coming and it was going to stick this time. But yeah, are they making decisions like this because of lack of information or, just hesitancy, or is EV just that simple and that, that everybody is picking that as the winner? I still think that as far as winners and losers, hydrogen will have to have a space. It's just a matter of how long will it take, right? And so maybe this was too much too soon. Does the article indicate why they made the decision?
Well, just looking, actually, just as I'm looking at it, interestingly enough, Hydrogenics was involved in this one. About $570,000 was paid through a sole source contract to Hydrogenics.
Right on.
To support some of the design works. That was interesting. Let me see if I can see. And actually, they are suggesting that because of the ultimate design of the GO expansion project, they will be leaving it up to, I guess, the firm that wins the procurement contract, that a potential bidder could include hydrogen-powered trains in its submission as a kind of a pilot project. But the technology's exclusion from the reference design indicates Metrolinx believes it can't be relied on. So the fact that it can't be relied on sounds like that's kind of a big driver. It looks like the article also references, an email that was uncovered through a Freedom of Information request in September of 2017 by Phil Vester, who I guess was then the incoming Metrolinx CEO.
Sounds juicy.
What's that? Sorry.
It sounds juicy. Freedom of Information Act always sounds juicy to me.
Well,
keep going.
So Hydrail, which is the name of this, the Go Transit initiative or operation, I guess you could call it, trains with the operating on hydrogen. There's an untested application the organization couldn't afford to bet Go's future on. So the fact that it wasn't tested, it further explains that there was supposed to be a launch in Germany, but the vehicles had never been put into service on anything approaching the scale being contemplated for Go. So it sounds like it's they couldn't afford to put their future on it. The scale wasn't there. They didn't want to rely on it. So those are probably reasons that they decided.
Yeah. Well, and so that's, it's discouraging for that particular opportunity, but it is encouraging that, there are other hydrogen ready technologies that are out there. You look at the fuel cell folks like Ballard, like Plug Power, like Bloom. There's a lot of technologies that have come of age, and there are other technologies. We've had 2G on the podcast. They have a hydrogen ready engine. Jenbacher's, closed. The turbine, folks can do it. So I think, it has less infrastructure challenges than EV, I think, because we can piggyback on the existing natural gas infrastructure for the most part. So it's good to know that it was more of a technology maturity thing than anything else.
Yeah.
There's another story that hit my radar this morning from a website called smartenergydecisions.com. This new commitment that Citibank, the new CEO, and she makes this commitment that the investment bank will be net zero in carbon emissions by 2050. And, I'm intrigued not intrigued, but I'm just amazed at whether you open, I got the National Post here in front of me, or, you read any news, any kind of, and I'm not, really deeply involved in this world, although more and more, you read stories of commitments by those who are holding the purse strings of, we're going to be here by this point, and we are going to take our money out of dirty coal and dirty fossil and move it here. And, it's one thing for, you had the leaders early on who were moving for it, and then you had governments that wanted to do it, but now when money talks, right? And so now when you see that, it's going to be that's just coming up more and more and more, right?
Yeah, well, and climate's coming up in every single paper. Reading the paper every morning, there's not one paper that doesn't have something about climate. So it's interesting, to hear about that. I think this is actually the next article that I was going to mention was Tories fear O'Toole will put a price on carbon. So this is going to be interesting because, as we know, the federal Conservative government was really opposed to carbon tax, and what Aaron O'Toole is suggesting is that he may actually go forward with a carbon tax if he were to be elected. And part of the thought process, I think, there is. Certainly within Ontario and Quebec and BC, everybody's thinking about climate. The millennials are thinking about climate change. That's part of the reason, and I think the driver. I mean, you and I have heard even that students are not going to support universities if they don't, hear that those universities are engaged in some way, shape, or form in some form of a climate neutral or a post-carbon plan. So. It'll be interesting to kind of see what happens here, because the article did comment on Western Caucus members being very upset with the idea, and obviously Western Canada, you can imagine why. But it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
It's my sense on all of this, and my mother always used to say that we have to have the extremes to move the middle, right? And so all of this stuff, regardless of the color or the brand of those who are in power, the extremes are moving towards, the climate movement is happening, and we're going to take 2 steps forward and we're going to take 1 step back. But if this was 10 years ago, Stephen Harper government in Canada, no effing way this is happening. But I think now, it's just the middle is moving. And so if the Conservatives want to stay relevant to the middle and have a chance in Hades of trying to get a minority or, a majority government, that's democracy. You have to, respond to where you're, and I know that those who are, to your point, who are tied into some of the stuff we do out in Alberta, they may, I may be getting some unhappy texts at some point, but by saying all this, but it's the reality. And so as an industry and as folks like us, we have to just figure out where do we fit in that? I mean, it's happening. Let's figure out, what are the best technologies that are positioned to solve those problems, and it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, well, and the reality is, if they don't do something, I think then the Liberals are just going to get reelected, and that's the end of the story, right? So if the Conservatives want to stand a chance, I think that they've got to come up with some sort of a plan. So as much as the caucus members might be upset with Aaron Toole, I think maybe he's heading in the right direction there, but. I guess that's my personal opinion.
Yeah, and the intent was not to be a political talk show by any means. So we should probably stay away from that. But let's look at the last segment. Is I'm totally spitballing here, but I'm trying to find what's trending on Twitter. May or may not be energy related. Here, Italy blocks shipment of AstraZeneca vaccine bound for Australia. This is interesting, not energy related, but the whole nationalism and kind of even the organized crime around vaccines. It's It's scary stuff. It's going to be. I mean, do you know anybody who's got a vaccine yet?
Fallon's grandparents actually just got it yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Actually, one of them in Ontario. So they're both in Quebec. One of them actually, though, is getting on the other side is getting it today. So I mean, obviously older people. I'm trying to think if there's anybody that I know though that stateside has received it. I don't think so. What about you?
We have a mutual friend who runs one of the engine distributors in the U.S. One of the green engine distributors, and he has a vaccine.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, he put his apparently he put his job title down on some application, and then they deemed him essential because he was in the C-suite. So yeah, I heard my first story today actually of somebody who turned down the vaccine.
Really?
Yeah, it was a first responder, firefighter, and they turned it down. So
and why, do you know?
Anti-mask, anti-vaccine, I guess. You know, they don't want Bill Gates being able to control their every movement. I guess that was their concern. I don't know. I don't know what conspiracy theory they were ascribing to. So it's I think it will come. It's still like COVID. We're still in the early days of the vaccine trail. And I think even by Easter and beyond, we'll have a much clearer picture as Canadians, and it will get better, and it'll beat the expectations that we have. So
it'll be interesting to see. In the U.S., I think they've been talking about kind of a choice of what vaccine you might want to get, what you could, to have a choice there. But I don't think that they're going to necessarily be offering that here in Canada. So we'll see how that rolls out. But
yeah. Well, let's keep our choices to EV versus hydrogen. Let's Good. Well, Lisa, this was fun. This was our first try at the Energy Roundtable. Let's try it again next week, and maybe we'll bring in a guest or two as we go, and just a light kind of a commentary on what's happening in our space, and see if we're bringing value to our community. So thank you for trying this and testing it out, and
no
we'll
problem.
talk again next week.
Sounds good.
Cool. Stay safe.
You too, Matt. Thanks.